Under Mayor Zohar Mamdani, New York City is facing a tipping point. Wealthy residents and middle-class families are leaving in record numbers, fleeing high taxes, rising crime, and an eroding quality of life. Their preferred destinations? Texas, Florida, and the Carolinas, states offering lower costs and a stronger sense of safety. But this isn't just a migration story. It's an economic alarm bell. As New York's tax-based contracts, its ambitious social programs hang in the balance, threatening to unravel the fiscal fabric that once made the city globally iconic. The ripple effects aren't confined to residents. Tourism, long a pillar of the city's economy, is now faltering under the weight of bad press and safety fears. International tourism is collapsing across the U.S., but New York's sharp decline is especially alarming.
Don't get fooled by the label. Subscribe now to uncover what's really behind your favorite brands, and get the truth Big Food doesn't want you to see.
Canadian tourist arrivals have plummeted by 25%, driven by fears over crime, political unrest, and a sense that the city no longer offers the experience it once promised. And New York isn't alone. Major states like Florida and Michigan are also seeing dramatic downturns as global travelers shift their attention to Europe and Mexico. This isn't just a rough patch. It's a crisis of confidence. Without real reforms in safety, governance, and economic policy, cities like New York risk not only losing residents, but their place on the world stage. Masses are fleeing New York City, and the consequences are unfolding faster than officials are willing to admit. Under Mayor Zohar Mamdani, the city is undergoing one of the most significant demographic and economic transformations in its modern history. But it's not the kind of transformation politicians campaign on. This is a crisis driven by high taxes, rising crime, and a quality of life that's steadily declining. The city that once stood as a symbol of American prosperity is now watching its wealth, its workers, and its tourists vanish, heading south to places like Texas, Florida, and the Carolinas. It's not a small trickle. It's a mass exodus. Hundreds of thousands of residents, many of them high-income earners, are packing up and leaving. These are the people who once sustained the city's massive tax base, who paid for schools, infrastructure, social programs, and cultural initiatives. Now they're gone. And in their absence, New York's fiscal stability is starting to crack. The problem isn't just that people are leaving. It's who is leaving. Wealthy professionals, business owners, and middle-class families, people who once saw New York as a long-term investment, are giving up, and they're heading to states with lower taxes, looser regulations, and a stronger sense of public safety. In short, they're looking for what New York used to offer. The paradox is staggering. On one hand, the city is pushing forward with ambitious social programs that require billions in funding. On the other, the tax base is shrinking fast. The money's drying up. That's not speculation. That's math. You can't run a city on ideology when the balance sheet doesn't add up. At the core of this fight is a simple truth. Safety matters. And right now, New York doesn't feel safe. Crime is up. Protests are constant. The social climate is tense, unpredictable, and hostile. It's not just residents who feel it. Tourists do too. The streets aren't filled with excitement anymore. They're filled with caution. And when tourists don't feel safe, they don't spend. They don't book. They don't come back. Tourism is the lifeblood of New York's economy. Hotels, restaurants, retail, entertainment. When people stop visiting, the damage is immediate. In 2025, Canadian tourism to New York dropped by 25%. That's not a fluctuation. That's a collapse. The ripple effect hits every corner of the city's economy. Fewer hotel bookings, fewer Broadway tickets sold, fewer meals eaten out, and fewer jobs. It's not just New York. The United States as a whole is facing a tourism collapse. For the 9th straight month, international visitor numbers are down. Florida, Texas, Michigan, all former tourism powerhouses, are reporting steep declines. While global travel has bounced back in other parts of the world, the U.S. stands out as an outlier, not because of external factors, but because of internal failure, political instability, rising crime, poor service. Travel safety indices now rank several American cities among the most dangerous in the world. That has consequences. It creates hesitation. It drives travelers towards safer, friendlier alternatives. Europe, Mexico, Asia, places that don't require biometric data. At the border, places that aren't locked in endless culture wars. Even within the U.S., states are scrambling to stop the bleeding. California, Florida, Illinois, Louisiana, they're launching discounts, cultural promotions, and symbolic gestures just to win back Canadian visitors. It's desperate, and it's not working fast enough. For businesses, the economic pain is already here. Hotels are cutting staff. Restaurants are closing early. Local attractions are running at half capacity. Entire neighborhoods that once thrived on tourist dollars are now struggling to stay afloat. And it's not just about revenue. It's about jobs, livelihoods, and the long-term viability of entire industries. This isn't theoretical. This is happening now. And what's worse, there's no national strategy to fix it. Government spending on tourism promotion is down. Border policies are up, and public confidence is sinking. The rest of the world sees it clearly. The U.S. is no longer the safe, reliable, exciting destination it once was. New York, once the crown jewel of global tourism, is now at risk of becoming a cautionary tale. The loss of international confidence is real. The erosion of trust is measurable, and the consequences are already visible. International tourists don't want to navigate a city they perceive as unstable. They don't want to risk their safety, their time, or their money. Even the domestic tourism market is cooling. American travelers are skipping New York for Nashville, for Austin, for Charleston, cities that are safer, cleaner, and more affordable. The New York value proposition, high energy, world-class culture, and unmatched experiences, isn't holding up under the weight of its dysfunction. And yet, the city leadership continues to push forward with costly programs while the financial foundation weakens. It's a mismatch that can't last. A city that spends more than it earns loses its ability to function, and a city that can't guarantee safety loses its ability to attract. This is a feedback loop. High taxes drive out wealth. Lost wealth shrinks services. Fewer services, lower quality of life. Lower quality of life drives more people out, and the cycle repeats. What's happening in New York is just a symptom of a broader national illness. When security is politicized, when governance becomes a game of ideology over pragmatism, and when leaders ignore the hard truths of economics, collapse is never far behind. There's still time to reverse course, but it requires admitting failure. It requires prioritizing safety, fiscal responsibility, and functional governance over political showmanship. It requires understanding that the global economy doesn't wait for ideology. It responds to results. Without major reforms, both New York City and the United States as a whole will continue to lose ground. And once a reputation is lost on a global stage, rebuilding it isn't just expensive, it's nearly impossible. Tourism isn't just a luxury, it's a signal of how the world sees you. And right now, that signal is flashing red. If you're watching this and care about the future of American cities, especially New York, hit the like button so this message cuts through the noise. Share this with someone who still believes New York can be saved, but knows it won't happen without serious change. Drop a comment below about what you've seen, whether you live in the city or have stopped visiting. And subscribe for more breakdowns like this, because the only way to fix what's broken is to face it head-on, together. New York has been here before, but this time the stakes are higher, and the world is watching. And the question everyone's quietly asking, but no one in city leadership wants to answer is this. What happens when the tipping point is behind us? Because what's unfolding in New York City right now isn't a phase. It's a structural breakdown. It's not just rich people fleeing to avoid taxes. It's working-class families being priced out, small businesses shuddering under crime pressure, and entire communities losing faith that the city can recover. This isn't just an economic story. It's a human one. It's the barista who used to work in a packed midtown cafe, now clocking out early because there's no foot traffic. It's the hotel maid whose hours got cut after foreign bookings dried up. It's the restaurant owner in Little Italy whose watch footfall vanished as tourists reroute to safer, more welcoming destinations. These aren't headlines. These are people, and they're all staring down the same harsh reality. New York is becoming unsustainable. For those trying to live in it, and for those who used to dream of visiting. The international numbers are brutal. The U.S. has now recorded 9 consecutive months of decline in international tourism. While Europe and Asia are experiencing post-COVID rebounds, the United States is moving in the opposite direction. And New York City, the most iconic American destination, is bleeding the hardest. Canadian visitors, once a dependable, high-spending tourist group, are dropping off fast. A 25% year-on-year decline in 2025. That's catastrophic. And that number doesn't just represent lost revenue. It reflects a fundamental shift in perception. When even neighboring allies no longer feel comfortable or interested in visiting your biggest city, it's not just a travel problem. It's a reputation problem. And don't kid yourself. This decline isn't due to some vague global economic downturn. This is self-inflicted. A product of poor governance, misaligned policy priorities, and unchecked urban decay. New York has always been expensive, but now it's expensive and unsafe. Tax-heavy and underperforming. Crowded and decaying. Mayor Zohran Mamdani's administration, driven by high-minded social priorities, continues to expand spending. But here's the fatal contradiction. The city's ability to fund those priorities is collapsing beneath them. Wealthy residents who once carried the fiscal burden are leaving, and what's left is a shrinking pool of middle-income earners who are barely hanging on themselves. The social safety net, no matter how well-intentioned, is only as strong as the tax base supporting it. And in New York, that base is crumbling. This is not a warning for 5 years from now. This is the reality today. Broadway shows are reporting softer box office numbers. Midtown hotels are slashing room rates just to fill occupancy. Flagship retail outlets are exiting high-rent districts. And the signature hum of New York, the energy, the excitement, the foot traffic, has dulled. The worst part? Washington is silent. While other nations invest in tourism promotion, rethink border policies, and actively court international travelers, the U.S. is doing the opposite. Biometric data collection at the border, confusing entry requirements, zero coordination with state governments. And with political polarization getting worse, there's no appetite for national recovery strategy, just more culture war chaos. Meanwhile, states like Florida and Texas are doing what New York won't. Cutting taxes, improving public safety, and aggressively recruiting both residents and tourists. They're not waiting for the federal government. They're moving fast, and they're winning. People and businesses aren't just relocating, they're thriving. Tourism dollars that once flowed into New York are now landing in Austin, Tampa, and Charleston. You don't need to be an economist to understand what that means for the future. New York's decline has ripple effects across the entire U.S. economy. It's a major driver of domestic air traffic, cultural exports, retail, and international appeal. If New York falls into long-term decline, it drags the entire nation down with it, not just in GDP terms, but in soft power, in image, and relevance. Tourists don't travel to a country for its politics. They travel for safety, experience, and culture. And right now, they're finding all three elsewhere. Even American travelers are choosing to bypass NYC. The idea of a weekend in Manhattan used to conjure energy and magic. Now it conjures headlines about subway crime, police understaffing, and overrun shelters. There's no novelty in stress. This is not about panic. It's about accountability. City leaders were warned. Crime data was ignored. Tax trends were dismissed. Middle-class discontent was laughed off as right-wing talking points. And now, the damage is measurable and possibly irreversible. You don't restore a tourism brand with slogans. You restore it with results. Fixing this starts with safety. If visitors don't feel safe, nothing else matters. Not Broadway. Not museums. Not nightlife. Public safety is the floor, and New York is operating without it. Then comes fiscal reform. Stop treating high earners like an ATM with no address. Because now they do have a new address, and it's outside city limits. You can't build a city for everyone if the people funding it leave the second their lease is up. Then comes public accountability. The people of New York deserve to know where their tax money is going. They deserve public transportation that works, streets that are clean, and leaders who prioritize stability over ideology. Anything less is negligence. And finally, The national government must get involved. Tourism is national soft power. Losing tourists means losing global influence. A coordinated strategy is long overdue, one that focuses on safety, accessibility, affordability, and cultural promotion. The longer this is ignored, the more damage is done. Because here's the truth. Tourists may come for a weekend, but their impressions last years. And right now, their impression of New York and America is that it's not worth the risk. This isn't just about recovering from a downturn. It's about preventing collapse. If these warnings are ignored, if political leadership continues to pretend things are fine, if the exodus continues and international arrivals keep dropping, then New York isn't just in a slump. It's in free fall. And it won't matter how many speeches get made or how many press releases get published. The world is already moving on. Tourists are already choosing other destinations. Investors are redirecting capital. Families are choosing new cities to raise their children. This is what it looks like when a city, once the heartbeat of a nation, starts to flatline. But it doesn't have to end this way. Recovery is possible, but it requires honesty, and it requires action. The reckoning has already begun. What we're seeing in New York City is not a seasonal dip or a momentary crisis. It's the early stages of a long-term unraveling, and it's being met with stunning levels of denial from those in charge. Mayor Zohran Mamdani and his allies aren't just failing to acknowledge the collapse. They're actively steering into it. The city is hemorrhaging residents and tourists alike. Yet leadership continues to double down on high-tax policies, unchecked social spending, and ideological programs that sound good in press conferences but don't hold up against the cold, hard data. This is not sustainable. You cannot run a global city with a shrinking tax base. You cannot attract international investment when every week brings new headlines about violent crime, public transit failures, or political dysfunction. And you cannot revitalize tourism when the message coming from the city is, pay more, get less, and hope for the best. Let's talk about what's happening beneath the surface. The budget shortfall is growing. New York's tax structure was built on the assumption that a steady stream of high-income earners would always be there to fund it. But that assumption is broken. The top 1% of earners once contributed over 40% of the city's income tax revenue. Now, many of them have moved to Florida, to Texas, to the Carolinas, anywhere but here, and they're not coming back. Once they leave, their tax dollars vanish. Their businesses follow. Their spending disappears. And the gap they leave behind isn't just numeric, it's structural. That means every promised program, from housing to healthcare to education, is now being supported by fewer and fewer contributors. It's a house of cards, and it's swaying. Meanwhile, the cost of crime is measured not just in statistics, but in behavior. Tourists have choices. When they start to hear about subway assaults, daytime robberies, and political protests turning violent, they adjust their plans. They choose other cities. They cancel hotel bookings. They scroll past that flight deal to JFK and click book now on something that doesn't involve police sirens and lockdown alerts. And yes, perception matters just as much as reality. You can spin the numbers all you want. But if travelers feel like New York is dangerous, that feeling becomes fact in the marketplace. Safety is not a debating point for the average tourist. It's a deal breaker. And right now, New York has failed that basic test. This isn't just anecdotal. Businesses are reporting it. Hotel occupancy is down. Restaurant reservations are flatlining. Iconic attractions, Times Square, the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, are seeing fewer international faces. That's not normal. That's not adjustment. That's economic distress. And the damage doesn't stop at city limits. The collapse of New York's tourism model sends shockwaves through the national economy. Airlines suffer. Tour operators take a hit. Global brands reconsider U.S. expansion plans. International partners, especially in Europe and Canada, rethink travel deals and cross-border collaborations. Let's be absolutely clear. The United States is becoming less attractive to the world, not because of its culture, not because of its people, but because of its chaos. Tourists don't want to navigate biometric data collection at the border. They don't want to risk getting caught in a protest downtown. They don't want to worry about their hotel being understaffed their cab driver being overworked, or their restaurant service being non-existent. And when they can go to Lisbon, Tokyo, or Montreal for half the price and double the peace of mind, why wouldn't they? Other countries are playing to win. The U.S. is playing to survive. And New York, once the flagship of American ambition, is now an example of how quickly things can fall apart when ideology replaces governance. The worst part is the feedback loop. Fewer tourists means less revenue. Less revenue means fewer services. Fewer services mean a worsening public environment. A worsening environment pushes out more residents. Those residents take their dollars with them, and the cycle deepens. This is what a slow-motion collapse looks like. And let's be honest, most city leaders don't live in the world they're mismanaging. They're not riding the subways at 10 p.m. They're not walking through tourist zones where foot traffic has thinned and anxiety has thickened. They're not the ones calculating whether to move to Miami because their neighborhood pharmacy just closed due to theft. But regular people are. Tourists are. And they're voting with their feet. The policies that were meant to protect the vulnerable are now accelerating vulnerability. The social programs that were meant to uplift the city are now at risk of collapse from underfunding. The very structures that once made New York resilient, its tax base, its tourism engine, its middle class, are under pressure like never before. And what's being offered in response? Campaigns, slogans, blame shifting. Enough. The city needs leadership that understands that recovery doesn't happen through words. It happens through priorities. That means restoring public safety, not just by numbers, but by presence. That means encouraging business, small and large, to stay, not flee. That means restructuring taxation to stop punishing productivity and investment. And that means reconnecting with the global community not through bureaucracy, but through hospitality. New York needs to become a place worth visiting again. It needs to be a place where tourists feel welcome, not wary. A place where residents can walk the streets without fear, and where businesses can plan for the future without betting against the city. There's still time, but not much. The window is closing. And if nothing changes, New York will become the blueprint for how a world-class city becomes irrelevant in a single generation. So here's what you can do. If this breakdown resonates, hit the like button so this message rises above the noise. Share it with someone who loves the city but knows it's in trouble. Leave a comment with your experience, especially if you stop visiting or if you've seen the decline firsthand. And subscribe to stay engaged in these critical conversations. Because the collapse of New York's tourism isn't just about dollars. It's about decline. And the only way to stop it is to confront it. Now,